Hello, I am Chitra Ramaswamy, and I'm a journalist and author and a Wigtown mega fan. So I'm very sorry to be doing this here in my own home in Leith, in Edinburgh, and not in Wigtown itself. So today I'm going to do a short reading. So I hope you've all got your cups of tea ready. I have mine. And I'm going to read from this book, Antlers of Water. Edited by Kathleen Jamie, the inimitable Kathleen Jamie, and it's a book of nature and environmental writing by Scotland-based writers. And I don't really consider myself as a nature writer per se, so I was absolutely thrilled to be asked to do this. So my contribution to this book is called 3 Meditations on Absence in Nature and Life. And so it's split into 3 sections, and I'm going to read from the very first section, which is called Pol de Vain. Now, that's a Gaelic word, so my apologies if I've said it wrong. Looking back from the vantage point of right now, it occurs to me that the walks we don't do might be as significant as the ones we do. The road's not so much less travelled as not travelled at all. After all, absences matter in nature as much as they do in life. Recesses, glens, and corries are as much a part of the total mountain, as Nan Shepherd so satisfyingly called it, as its ridges, braes, and summits. I'm thinking specifically of a walk I failed to do in the late spring of 2017 when I was 7 months pregnant with my second child. We were staying in Applecross, that most contained and possessively loved of Scotland's peninsulas, as much because of how it's reached as what you find when you get there, and how it is reached, via the Bealach na Bar, an historic drover's road crisscrossing the mountains with the precocity of a rhythm gymnast's ribbon. A dizzying sequence of hairpin pens, more alpine than Scottish in spirit and gradient. It seems old to us, but is as close as our last breath next to the millions of years the mountain has on it. The Bealach, by comparison, was laid in 1822, the same year the Caledonian Canal, linking Scotland's east and west coasts through the Great Glen, was completed. Walter Scott's Land of the Mountain and the Flood was opening up to the world, to people, cattle, and to the bold and entitled Victorian idea of touring, of going places just for the sake of being in them. Almost 200 years later, we pitched up. This was not long after the latest tourist drive had taken off with a verve, and some might say short-sightedness to match the Victorians. The North Coast 500, billed as the ultimate road trip around Scotland, and sponsored by, who else? Aston Martin, with the promise of the best dolphin viewpoint in Scotland and watching salmon leap upstream. Included within the 516-mile loop was the Bealach na Bar. And so for the first time driving that notorious single-track road, we shared it with a cavalcade of bikers, endurance cyclists, motorhomes, and petrolheads in classic cars. My feelings were mixed. As Shepherd noted of her beloved Cairngorms in the 1977 foreword to The Living Mountain, written 30 years after she first penned the masterpiece, too many boots, too much commotion, but then how much uplift for how many hearts. Later, a local who ran a small farm shop out of his garage told me that accidents were on the rise and the Bealach was unable to withstand the traffic. Not for the first time, though perhaps the first in Scotland. I wondered if the best way to love a place was to not go there at all. We rented a crofter's cottage clad in more wood panelling than I'd ever seen, called the House on the Rocks. This was to be the location of our last holiday as the 3 of us, 4 including my dog, though of course the 5th was there too, orbiting my womb and growing in size and insistence by the day. There was a farm opposite, and one warm afternoon our dog, as foolishly urbane as her owners, escaped and chased the sheep and spring lambs until a farmer's wife bellowed at her to go home, atop of the voice order that reverberated across the higgledy-piggledy township of Toscaig, where we never saw another soul, and probably reached the spider crabs twitching in the bay around the disused harbour. The dog instantly obeyed, returning to us with her tail between her legs. my son then 3, and terrified of the drone of the buzzy bees having their breakfast in the garden, a fear which bloomed that summer and has returned every year since, was so taken with the drama he ventured outside to jump up and down and laugh his head off. We admonished him because it wasn't funny, though our mouths were beginning to twitch in the way of parents doing their best to remain parents under humorous circumstances. And it wasn't, but there was a hysteria to those long, close stays in that cottage clinging to the rocks. And in the end, we laughed too. The bees continued their floral song, but we did not hear it. Stop for a little sip of tea. The following day, we decided to attempt a nearby walk to the coral beach at Ardban, just 6 kilometres on an ancient path through moorland and coast. We read these instructions on our phones as if we were different people, or rather our former selves. Perhaps it was an act of wish fulfillment. Those desire lines making for the land's edge represented who we wanted to be in a time of escalating responsibility with more of everything on the way. Basically, we read them as if we were free, to go where we liked, when we wanted, at a pace of our own choosing. Walking an existing route is often, paradoxically, about the pursuit of a designated amount of freedom. The freedom to be told where to go and how precisely to get there. To follow obtuse signs on wooden posts knocked into the ground. To intuit nothing beyond what part of a path to give your weight. To refresh screen-dry eyes with horizons, natural light, as we now call what was once just light. And living things, large and small, real and imagined, flitting on the periphery of your vision, to pick up a pebble just to carry it warm in the hollow of your hand. The reality, 2 women, one heavily pregnant, a 4-year-old boy on the brink of massive change, a sister, and a fortnight after her birth, an autism diagnosis, and an anxious city dog overwhelmed by unfamiliar scents. The sky was overcast, which combined with my desiccated eyes was the fetus drinking from them too, made it difficult to see. It was as if the world had resolved into an underexposed photograph. It had been raining all morning and the stony paths ran with rivulets of very clear, glossy water. As the moorland became more boggy, the pools on either side of the path, which seemed like a bridge suspended over water, became swollen. Irregular drops plopped into them, proof that it was still raining, even if we could not feel it. My son, already demanding to be carried on my partner's shoulders, preferably back to the car, became obsessed with these muddy puddles. He would not be moved on. Everywhere there was water, and this being Westeros moorland, there was nowhere water was not, had to be paid tribute by way of a stone thrown into its cloudy depths. When a stone could not be prized from the path with his small cold fingers, my son railed at the injustice. Meanwhile, my pelvic girdle, that butterfly-shaped cluster of bones pinned to the mouth of the spine, was killing me, producing a rhythmic grinding when I walked that felt as though it would be ground to dust in the same way a dead butterfly's wings crumble away to nothing. Every time I had to step wide or come down on unstable ground or go downhill or uphill for that matter, it hurt. Everywhere there was oppression, in the sky, my body, and the tense atmosphere between us. Finally, I refused to continue and sat on a rock overlooking a small sheltered bay, studded by a single outcrop of rock where one immediately pictured seals basking, though there were none. The tide was low and the sky's reflection blackened the water and browned the spiny seaweed in the bay, which I later discovered was called Pole de Vein. Claire, my partner, walked on to see how far this extraordinary coral beach was and whether it was worth it, which was unlikely unless my bed happened to be stranded on the sand. I watched my son, by this time throwing handful after handful of stones into the bay in an ecstasy of permission. I wept half-heartedly. Took a photo on my phone. I consciously tried to look at what was in front of my eyes, but my mind had already taken flight, ascending over coast, peninsula, and mountain pass, until the map of the entire island was revealed with all its divisions, turmoil, and extreme weather. The land that was Britain in the maddening weeks leading up to a general election and the horror of the Grenfell fire. I saw myself, a British Indian woman and her son, at a remote anchorage point on the northwest fringe of Scotland. It is often in such vulnerable moments that I feel the brown of my skin most viscerally. Then Claire came back. She had lost faith too, which basically marks the end of a happy walk, and declared the beach too far away. She had not gone far enough to see it herself. We turned back, defeated, but also aware that we had wished for more of the world than we could handle that day. 3 months later, in those wild domestic weeks after a baby is born and a mother's body is made of fluid, fire, and is somehow like the total mountain itself again, I Googled the area while breastfeeding my daughter in bed. On a walking website, I found a photo of Polder Vein, composed exactly like the one I had taken, almost certainly from the same rock. The only difference was the weather, monochrome in mine, a perfect summer's day, and theirs. Apparently, just round the corner, on a path bending to the left, was Ardban, a trio of abandoned crofts by a coral beach. Though nothing is what it seems, and the coral is in fact marl, fragments of calcified seaweed crushed to a fine powder by the sea. Just as I imagined that walk pounding my pelvis to dust. The sun bleaches the marl, turning many of Western Scotland's beaches a misleading tropical white. Carbon dating has shown that marl deposits can be more than 5,500 years old, and never mind a 9-month gestation. Marl grows at a stately pace of 1 millimetre a year. I have not been back. Yet the walk to Ardban that I did not complete, the destination at which I never arrived, is as powerful a memory as many places I have been. I can even imagine at some fleet-footed time in the future when I intend, or rather hope, to be more free again, seeing myself on that beach as if I did make it all the way to the land's edge. In fact, there I am now, a temporary home for 2 people in a land I no longer understand, sifting centuries-old marl through my fingers, as foreign and fragile as I'll ever be. Thank you. Thank you so much. Bye.